Good evening. My name is Beth Margison, and on behalf of the Portsmouth Public Library and the Citizens for Voter Education, welcome to this evening's Candidates Forum. We would also like to, we'd like to honor a longtime member of our group, Elaine Siracusa, who died last October. Elaine was an invaluable member of the Citizens for Voter Education, and she is greatly missed. Tonight, we will hear from the candidates for City Council. There are 17 candidates running for 9 seats, although one of the candidates, Kathleen Saldati, could not be here tonight. The election will be held on Tuesday, November 7th. The polls will be open from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. Polling locations are for Ward 1, New Franklin School, Ward 2, Portsmouth Middle School, Ward 3, Portsmouth Senior Activity Center, Ward 4, Dondero Elementary School, Ward 5, Little Harbor School. If you are unsure where to vote, you can check the City Clerk section of the City website, call 610-7245, or email the City Clerk at cityclerk@cityofportsmouth.com. If you are not registered to vote, you may register to vote at the City Clerk's office during regular business hours, at a Portsmouth Public Library registration event on October 18th, or at the polls on Election Day. To register, you must show proof of citizenship, such as a birth certificate, passport, naturalization papers, a citizenship affidavit, or any other document deemed reasonable by the registrars. You must show proof that you are 18 or older, and proof of residence, such as a utility bill, rental agreement, or mortgage statement. The document must show your street address. No P.O. boxes or business addresses are acceptable. The voter ID law requires that you show a photo ID in order to vote. You may use a valid driver's license, a DMV ID card, U.S. Armed Services ID, U.S. passport, valid New Hampshire student ID card, or any ID deemed acceptable at the polls. If you don't have a photo ID, simply fill out a challenged voter affidavit. You'll receive a letter from the Secretary of State requesting information that you voted. Simply return the confirmation. Your vote will be counted. Absentee ballots are now available. You may vote by absentee ballot if you will be absent from the city on Election Day, absent due to religious observance, physical disability, or absence due to employment, which involves the care of children or infirm adults with or without compensation, meaning whether paid or unpaid. Sample ballots for all of the wards have been posted on the City Clerk's website. There is a ballot question for this year's election. Shall we allow the operation of Keno games within the city of Portsmouth? Members of the audience here tonight are invited to submit written questions for the candidates. There are pencils and There are pencils and note cards on the chairs for this purpose. Just raise your hand and your question will be picked up. If we receive multiple questions on the same topic, they may be combined. This program is being broadcast on Channel 22 and will return between now and Election Day. Now let us hear from the candidates themselves. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement tonight in which they will answer the question, why have you chosen to run for City Council? Prior to inviting Councilor Andrew Bagley up, I will be reading a statement from Kathleen Saldati, who could not be here this evening. From Kathleen Saldati, I'm sorry I can't be with you this evening. I'm visiting one of my children out of state. Let me introduce myself and tell you why I am running. Many know me as the former Director of Marketing for the Music Hall and JSA Architects from New Hampshire Public Television, from my firm, Saldati PR, and Executive Director for Portsmouth Historical Society and the League of New Hampshire Craftsmen. I edited the book, A History of Portsmouth, New Hampshire in 101 Objects. Currently, I handle media relations for Portsmouth NH 400 and work as a marketing strategist for cross-current communications. What people may not know, I grew up in a household of 14 children whose parents were community activists who trained their children on creative problem solving and leadership, setting the expectation for action. From there, I became involved in every community in which I lived, student government, anti-war and women's movements, and electoral politics. Now I want to bring my problem-solving skills and my values of inclusiveness and civil discourse to the table to serve the people of Portsmouth. I call on all residents of Portsmouth to recommit ourselves to our historic Portsmouth legacy of civil discourse. We once helped to end the Russo-Japanese War in 1905 with citizen diplomacy. What leadership? With that as the inspiration, we can certainly address in a civil manner the challenges we face, from climate to housing. Civil discourse helps us welcome increased community participation. We are grateful to hear from some members of the community. We need to hear from others. Civil discourse helps us to learn what values we share. I am optimistic about working together, living those shared values together, and building the best Portsmouth for the next generation. Those siblings, as I mentioned, they are bright, articulate, and opinionated. When I started visiting Lincoln's hometown in the 1970s, I found an engaged community here with many diverse opinions. I felt right at home. And those problem-solving skills drilled into us, they ensured I would always ask if everyone was at the decision-making table. They provided me with new ways of seeing the big picture, pinpointing problems and best solutions, and identifying pulse points to be measured on the way to goals. I love solving problems. The more complicated, the better. The problems we face, other cities in the United States are facing. That means we can learn from each other. And we can lead. We have the tools, civil discourse, inclusiveness, comfort with disagreements, problem solving, optimism. We can build a shining example of a small American city, the vibrant, authentic, diverse, connected, and resilient city envisioned by our residents in the last master plan. I am optimistic about this moment in history, and I am energized by the idea of serving the residents of Portsmouth. I'm asking for your vote on November 7th. And again, that is from Kathleen Soldati. First, we will hear from Councilor Andrew Bagley. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you to the Citizens for Voter Education and to the Portsmouth Public Library and everyone here tonight and watching on TV. My name is Andrew Bagley, and I'm asking for your vote for my second term on the City Council. And we were kind of asked in our 2 minutes here to kind of address, why are we running for council? And for me, there's a serious part of council, like moving $2.2 million out of the CIP of this year's budget to kind of help keep our fiscal needs under control. But the real reason I'm running for council is a phrase a friend of mine coined, and I call it little big things. And little big things are, I had a mother ask me early on in my term, my son uses a mobility device. He can't watch the holiday parade. What can we do about that? So I went to Access Navigators, and I asked them, I said, this is the situation. What can we do? So we created for the first time ever an accessible viewing station at the top of the Bridge Street lot. We had some temporary accessible spaces. We set up some chairs. It was a great success. We did it for the Portsmouth 400 parade. We're going to be doing it for the Halloween parade. It's something that Portsmouth is going to be doing going forward. After that, we said, okay, that was a success. What else can we do? So Prescott Park, a lot of people that need mobility devices, they can't get to the Prescott Park Art Festival events anymore. Well, we restriped the parking lot there to have 16 van accessible spaces. So what we did this summer for the first time ever is at, I believe it was 3 p.m. until late in the evening, those spaces were reserved for people with handicap placards. It's these little big things that make a big difference to other people and don't cost the city any money that is the reason I want to continue to run for council. I can be a conduit for our citizens who have tremendous, great ideas and help enact those ideas throughout the city. And that's why I'm asking for your vote this Tuesday, November 7th. And I thank you all. Thank you, Portsmouth.
Thank you. We'll next hear from Rick Beckstead.
Good evening, Rick Beckstead. I'm going to say it as I usually do with most of my meetings, 1395 Islington Street. I guess I looked at the question a little bit differently. Why am I running? Why would I not run? These last 2 years have been an essential amount of money that has been spent when it comes to our budget. Most people go and talk about affordability when it comes here, and the affordability is being affected drastically. And I chose two concerns that I am deeply concerned about that I have been involved with many, many a times over the last 2 years and actually over the last 10 years. The constant demolition of buildings is starting to escalate in the city of Portsmouth more and more and time again. And I get it. People don't want to go and have the home that exists. But I've got Clinton Street, Kent Street, Essex Street, Cabot Street, and there is one next week that's going to go in front of the BOA that's on Sagamore to tear down a single-family home and put 2 duplexes there. What ends up happening, what people don't understand, is it revalues our land. That land now, Kent Street, paid almost $1 million for a piece of land, is basically what they did. They got a variance to go and build a single-family home there. Every one of those houses, the land is going to go up astronomically. This is happening at a greater pace. We need to stop this. I have the experience. I have the background to be able to go and work on this and be able to go and change it. Our budget is another big thing. We've gone from $138 million is what they'll tell you that it is today. But what they're not telling you is that there's a revenue stream that we created over the last 2 years. One of them was ARPA fund money. We got $12.5 million from the federal government. We used 4 and change to be able to offset our taxes last year. This year, we had a surplus. I'm not exactly sure how the surplus actually took place after we had ARPA fund money to be able to go and fill lost revenue from the previous year. But $4.4 million was added to that. Next year, that revenue is not going to be there. The next council is going to have to work diligently to make sure that we have our spending under control. It's going to be $142 million is going to be the start. And that's where it's going to end up being. I want to end up with a quote, and I'm sorry, but John Hines, and most people know who John Hines is, asked a very simple question. How big can Portsmouth get and still be Portsmouth? Thank you very much, and I hope to have your vote on number 7th.
Next, we'll hear from Councillor Rich Blaylock.
Thank you. Thank you to the Citizens for Voter Education for hosting this forum. Thank you all for attending this evening. Thank you for tuning in at home. Hello, Portsmouth. I'm Rich Blaylock. I'm seeking re-election to the City Council. I'm a third-generation City Councilor. I also co-own the Old Ferry Landing restaurant with my family in town. I grew up here and I attended school here. I started at the Children's Garden on Beverly Hill, went to Don Darrow School, had Mrs. Ann Walker as my 4th grade teacher, went on to Portsmouth Middle School, Portsmouth High School, and eventually Bates College. With the past 22 months, I feel I've made a difference. I also feel like I've learned a lot. I'm a servant leader, believes in listening to all the opinions and gathering all the facts before I make a decision. Over the past 2 years as councilor, I've served on the Historic District Committee, preserving our history. I've served on the Safe Water Advisory Group, making sure we have safe water to drink today and tomorrow. I've served on the Land Use Committee. I've served on the Recreation Board and also the Skate Park Committee. I believe in sound fiscal management, supporting the police, fire department, and our school department. I believe in preserving our history. I believe in embracing the arts. I believe in supporting our small businesses and our residents. I believe in supporting our youth and encouraging them to participate. I was proud to start Student Government Day, or to restart Student Government Day. And since then, we've been seeing students appear at public comment, which I really love because that shows it worked. I also want to encourage affordable housing for those that work here and those that grew up here. Why am I running? I'm not done. I still have the time and energy to serve. There's more things to do, and I want to continue on this journey to lead you, Portsmouth, through our future. So thank you. I hope you vote on November 7th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Councillor Kate Cook.
Thank you to Citizens for Voter Education for hosting this event this evening. I have been honored for the last 2 years to serve on the Portsmouth City Council. In that time, I feel like the council has accomplished quite a bit. We have bringing to culmination a climate action planning process. We're finishing a cultural planning process. We've adopted a new community power plan for the city of Portsmouth. We've also worked very diligently on affordable housing efforts, and we are continuing to work on governance efforts. I serve as the chair of the governance committee, which I brought to the city council to bring ethics and transparency reforms to the council. We've done quite a bit in changing the ethics ordinance, increasing transparency in our administrative ordinances, but I feel like we have a lot more work to do. And that's why I am running again for city council. I'd like to finish the governance work. I'd also like to continue my work on the Sustainability Committee, on the Energy Advisory Committee, and also on the Green Buildings Task Force to bring important changes that we need in our capital improvements budget to address sea level rise. We need to address adaptation measures and mitigation measures. But also, we need to continue our work to support arts and nonprofits in the city. I've served on the Arts and Nonprofits Committee, the Cultural Planning Subcommittee, and I'm also the liaison to the Public Art Review Committee. We are bringing forth right now a new Arts and Cultural Commission for the city, which passed through the City Council, and we have a new Public Art Review Committee. But we have a lot of work to do to continue to support arts and culture in the city that has been really negatively impacted by the pandemic. That continued work is critical for the city of Portsmouth because that supports our businesses. It supports the people who live here. We have to continue that work and continue it in our master planning process that starts in January. I would appreciate your vote on November 7th so I can continue that great work and bring those planning processes to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Kevin Coyle.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kevin Coyle, and I have to tell you that I'm delighted to see you all here. I have been in local government for 30-plus years, working as a prosecutor and other things, and I've never seen a meeting so well attended by all the people here. So thank you all for being here. I am a former Rockingham County Commissioner where I served for 8 years, and I managed about 600 employees and a $100 million budget. The question came up was, why are you running? And it's a pretty easy answer. I love Portsmouth. It's a great place, and I'm sure every one of you agree that this is the best place in New Hampshire to live, or you wouldn't be here. And that's why we're here. I'm running because I like the great schools we have. I like the great police and fire protection that we have. I like the sidewalks that we have. I like to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go for a walk on the sidewalks and feel safe. I like those things, and that's why I'm running, because I think Portsmouth needs good quality leadership. And now I have a minute left, so I'll keep going. So what I would tell you is one of the things that I think that the council that is currently here is missing is they're not asking enough questions. And I'll give you an example of that. Most recently, we had the largest police and fire union contract that was passed. Not a single question was asked of what it was going to do to the tax rate. And I think that's important. You need to ask these things because, as Mr. Beckstead said, our tax rate is going up dramatically. It's up 6% this year. Likely will be up a similar amount next year. As much as I love Portsmouth, I don't like paying, tens of thousands of dollars in tax bills. And with the reassessment that's coming up, it's going to get worse. So I'm running to make sure that I can help the community as best I can, and I see my time's up, so I'm going to end there. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Councilor Josh Denton.
My name's Josh Denton. I'm the last name on the ballot, and I'm asking for your vote on November 7th to keep Portsmouth moving forward. I fell in love with Portsmouth as a UNH undergrad, thought about the city often while I was in the Army, and moved here upon returning from Iraq. I'm the only candidate up here whose #1 issue is climate change. In 2017, I chaired the committee which created our 2018 net zero energy policy and the framework to actually achieve it, both which will become cornerstones of our climate action plan, and Portsmouth will have to go bold because there's a lack of leadership on this issue in the state to actually make sure everything in our climate action plan gets achieved. I have lived our affordable housing crisis, first as a waiter after returning from Iraq while I earned my master's in public administration. Then I waited tables again after using the GI Bill to graduate from law school while I successfully studied for the bar exam. And for the past 10 years, I lived the affordable housing crisis, seeing as After I paid my student loans, over half of my remaining income went towards rent. What I would like to do is ensure that the city deed property to the Portsmouth Housing Authority to make sure that they could continue to solve our affordable housing crisis. And my ideal location would be right outside in the lower lot. The largest impact, which I personally have had on the council, has to have been my push for either creating or expanding veterans tax credits, which have helped over 695 Portsmouth households here. Whether you love or hate me over the past 10 years of me being involved in city politics, I highly doubt that there's any question on where I stand on issues or my willingness to go bold. So I'm asking you to vote for me, Josh Denton, the last name on the ballot, November 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Petra Huda.
Good evening. My name is Petra Huda. I'd like to thank the hosts of this forum. I'm running for the City Council first and foremost to curb the unsustainable budget growth by leveraging my extensive diverse background in accounting and finance and my educational background. I'm a retired principal financial analyst with over 4 decades of experience in accounting and finance. I have accumulated a wealth of knowledge across a diverse range of 9 business sectors. This breadth of knowledge allows me to offer a fresh perspective across a diverse range of solutions. Obviously, my first priority would be to curb the unsustainable budget increases that we've had in the last 2 years. And I'd actually like to remind you that we will be having a twice postponed property reassessment and revaluation. It's mandatory this year, and the residents and taxpayers of Portsmouth are looking at an imminent hike to fund the budgets of the last 2 years. Next, my next priority is preserving Portsmouth's historic character. I'm deeply committed to preserving the unique character and charm of Portsmouth, particularly our downtown historic district and the waterfront. This commitment extends to all projects and initiatives, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this will apply to the new master plan. My last initiative would be to seek viable solutions for affordable housing. I am dedicated to addressing the affordable housing crisis in Portsmouth. It is an essential to pursue realistic solutions to make housing accessible for all residents. Over the past 2 years, my commitment to representing the best interests of the residents and taxpayers has been prioritized over the financial gains of others. I have continued with my dedication to diligently conduct research, and I have attended over 100 meetings. I ask for your vote on November 7th, and your vote will signify an endorsement of a more financially sustainable future for Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll next hear from Assistant Mayor Joe Kelly.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here, and thank you to our hosts. I'm going to start with the question we were asked to answer in this 2 minutes, which is why are you running for election or re-election? And I'm running for the same reason I did in 2019, which is because Portsmouth gave me a home. I've lived my whole life here in New Hampshire, mostly with my grandparents, but also in and out of the foster care system, and I moved to Portsmouth 13 years ago. Since then, I've established a business downtown. I employ local young residents. I've started nonprofits, and I've been very active in our community. I think that it goes without question that everyone who's up here, and Kathleen, who's not here tonight, loves our community. For me, being a city councilor and being up here, it's not just leadership in every way, but it's leading as an activist, leading as a community member. It is important, and one of the reasons I am running and ran before is because I think that dais up there needs to look like our community. It needs to have young people, it needs to have business owners, it needs to have homeowners, it needs to have renters, it needs to have people who live in the South End, or people like me who live all the way on Ocean Road. We need to make sure that when we're having these difficult conversations about affordability, about our taxes, about our schools, about the long-term planning of places like Prescott Park, that we're having a full table discussion. I won't ever claim to be an expert on wastewater management or planning in a huge fiscal budget, but what I will say is I believe that I have a special place and represent a demographic of our community that should be at that conversation. I look around and I talk constantly with a lot of the people up here, whether they are former counselors, current counselors, or people looking. And I think that what we have as residents is a really good chance and once-in-a-lifetime chance to have one of the most diverse councils that we've ever had. Because we have complex problems, as does every other municipality in our country. You know, we're not alone in the crises that we see. So just making sure that we have a council that really represents the Portsmouth that we see when we walk out the door. So please, I ask for your vote on November 7th.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Esther Kennedy.
Good evening, everyone, and I want to thank everyone for coming. My name is Esther Kennedy. Many of you know me as the Kayak Lady. I have lived in Portsmouth for 34 years. I'm a public school administrator that oversees multi-million-dollar budget. I am a graduate professor for Plymouth University and a small business owner of Esther's Marina and Portsmouth Harbor Market. I currently have a niece who's captain with the U.S. Army. She calls 41 Pickering Ave home with me herself. I'm running to keep Portsmouth a place that she and others can return to. Given this, we cannot have 2 more years of budgets at $18.2 million. We cannot keep adding employees at a rate of 36 positions in 2 years. We cannot cater to developers that disrespect our history and our master plan. We cannot stop learning from citizens and listening to them. We need to move forward with a new plan. As we all know, there was some dirty politics played in the last election, and 5 candidates known affectionately as the Beckstead Five were treated poorly. However, during our term on council, we brought back public comment at every meeting. We came with a fiscal responsibility budget, worked with residents on sound walls, community campus, and a skateboard park. Lastly, we brought a city through a pandemic. We gave and proved we can do the job. We also proved that we include all of you. I ask you to not only vote for Esther Kennedy, but please vote for all 5 of us on November 7th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Councilor Vince Lombardi.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm going to talk about a more personal aspect of why I'm running, I think. I've had 2 parallel careers. My first career was science and technology. I worked through a variety of businesses. I created my own business. I supported my family. I raised my children, and I retired in Portsmouth. I've been here 38 years, and I've had an opportunity for a great career here. My second career started in high school when I was a member of the Key Club, a service club of the Kiwanis. I then had military service, and I served my country. I came across a person who greatly interested me. His name was Patrick Geddes. He was a Scottish scientist and land use person. And he came up with the slogan, think global and act local. I've followed that with me for a long time. I have served on multiple nonprofit boards, city boards, the HDC, community planning programs, and now the City Council. The second career is from my heart and has taught me to listen, to lead, to collaborate and respect those who disagree, and trust my heart. When we talk about issues, I do have some preferences, but I promise to maintain an open mind to what others believe and have to say. As a counselor, I'll use my best skills and experience to work toward fair resolutions to all that comes before the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mayor Deglin McEachern.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you for the citizens of voter education. Thank you to the Portsmouth Public Library. My name is Deglin McEachern, and I'm running for 3 reasons. The first is my family. A lot of you knew my dad. He gave me the love of public service, but it is my wife who allows me to serve. Thank you, Lori, watching at home. I love you so much. I couldn't do any of this without you. My girls, you're a big reason why I do this. To get to see and love Portsmouth and to protect the things that I grew up in so that you can grow up with them as well is a big part of it, because I do love Portsmouth. That's the second reason. I love Portsmouth so much. I am biased. I think we have the greatest city in America, not just New Hampshire. We are so fortunate. And when you love something, though, sometimes there are harder conversations that you have to have. That is what I've learned in marriage. That is what I've learned on the city council. When you love something, it means to be honest. And some of the things that we go through as a city requires us to be honest with one another about the challenges that we face, whether it's affordability, both on a housing standpoint and a budget standpoint. But I know that that love is going to carry the day, because the last reason that I'm running is you all here. I love the citizens of Portsmouth. I love serving all of you as a councilor, as a mayor. You guys truly embody that the highest office in the land is that of citizen. You show up every day, whether it's on email, whether it's on phone calls, whether it's out here this evening. And you are the reason we are the city of the open door, because you keep that door open for all of us. You are what makes Portsmouth so special. And I just want to thank all of you for believing in Portsmouth and showing up for Portsmouth. I know that you're going to vote on November 7th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Councilor Beth Moreau.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for the host for hosting us tonight. I'm sorry if my voice goes out. I'm just going to tell you now. For those that don't know me, I'm Beth Moreau. I have been a lifelong resident of New Hampshire, and I've called Portsmouth my home for over 23 years now. I am an attorney here in the city and own my own business and try to help people buy and sell and refinance homes. I have served on the city planning board for 9 years prior to joining the city council. I also chair the land use committee, and I'm also the vice chair of the Rockingham Planning Commission. I would like to run. Why am I running again? Because I still think there's a lot of work to be done. I think that we have made some strides forward, especially when we're talking about the affordability. We've taken down some barriers in our ADU law. Our ordinance in which to be able to have people create more housing at their homes. You can actually create some of those now without actually going to a board. You also have the ability, we've also changed all the zoning in the downtown to be able to create so that if you want bigger buildings, you actually have to give us not only community space but workforce housing. There is more work to be done. We need to continue to look at parking and transportation. We need more public transportation, and we need to look at our zoning and parking. It shouldn't be the same downtown as it is on the West End, as it is in the more rural parts of our city. And we really need to take a look at the study that's being done now and try to work on that. I also have helped the city get some funds through some grants through Invest New Hampshire. So we need to continue the outreach that the Community Housing Navigator is working on, and we need to get all of the information and all the residents involved so that we can actually create a better Portsmouth that all of us are happy with. We need to work with our businesses and our residents to be able to create the housing that the people that work here can live here as well. I certainly hope that you will vote for me on November 7th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Andrea Pickett.
Thank you to the library and to the Citizens for Informed Voters, or Voter Education, excuse me. My name is Andrea Pickett, and I am running for a seat on the Portsmouth City Council. My background in public service stems from the need and lived experience of receiving public services. 7 years ago, I moved to Portsmouth with my daughter, who's now 8. She attends New Franklin School. If you met her, you wouldn't be surprised to hear that I believe she'll probably run for City Council next year. The Housing Authority was the foundation for me to not only find my own stability, but also to become an advocate for the other people who are living in poverty, who have experience with needing resources and dealing with policies that don't meet those needs immediately because they're written in ways that don't understand the experiences of the people they're trying to serve. For me, it was this realization that led me to begin advocating for the residents by attending school, getting a job with the Portsmouth Housing Authority. I sat on the board of the Great Bay Community College, and I founded United Against Hate on the Seacoast. I really believe in the idea that representation matters, a seat at the table matters. And I am here today to try and bring a little piece of that to Portsmouth. And I thank you all for giving me the chance to be that voice and representation, for giving me the trust and believing that somebody who may not be the typical socio-economic demographic that you would see sitting on the council could do a good job of speaking to the needs of the people who live here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Councillor John Tabor.
Good evening, and thanks to our hosts. 4 years ago, when I first ran for council, I asked a former councilor and friend for advice. Campaign door to door, he said, and then get in there and do some good. In my first term, I was able to expand the tax exemption for seniors to help them stay in their homes. I helped police, fire, and school, and the city staff talk to one another to share the difficulties of a COVID budget in 2020, and fostered the public dialogue that created a community vision for the McIntyre site. This term, I helped launch Portsmouth Community Power. It saved residents money on their electric bills every month, and they have green options they've never had before for renewable energy. As audit committee chair, we hired the first new auditor in 20 years. I also won the council approval for flash vote instant polling, so we engage hundreds of new voices in city government, especially those who can't go to night meetings. And I won council approval for spending guidelines before we start budgets, so taxes, we can work on keeping taxes not going up faster than residents' incomes. I want to keep doing good things as a councilor, and I never forget who I work for. 3 people I've met going door to door stay with me all the time. A young woman and her son who rent a house in Panaway. As home prices rise, she worries the owner will sell. Where can I afford to live with my son when that happens? She's a hard worker and a single mom, and she needs housing that she can afford. A couple that live on Dennett Street on low ground at the edge of the North Mill Pond. Every major storm surge, the water is getting closer to their house. They need us to take action on climate and build resilience on our waterfront. A mom and dad who live on Dunlin Way and have a boy at New Franklin. They want safe and well-funded schools where caring teachers close the learning gap after COVID. I'm running to keep working for people such as these, and I believe my record shows I have the leadership and experience to get things done. And I ask for your vote.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Paige Trace.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. To the Citizens for Voter Education, I thank you very much for hosting. I am Paige Trace, and this is why I've chosen to run again for City Council. 2 years ago, this council's civility, along with their transparency, was to transform the city of Portsmouth. I leave that answer up to you. In fact, The concept that their civility would cure all ills came with a cost. Consistent 9-0 votes with no explanation. Accept the vote. Portsmouth, you deserve better. I am no hero, nor do I pretend to be. I merely wish to contribute to you. I've served you before under a different mayor during a pandemic. That council working together brought Portsmouth through the pandemic with only a $4 million budget increase in 2 years. This council's budget has increased by $18.2 million in 2 years. We cannot sustain that. Portsmouth, our leadership must honestly and openly negotiate our budgets. We are the city of the open door, yet this council shut that door firmly on the why behind their votes. This council works for you, yet the minutes of their 66 non-public meetings are sealed and unavailable. I will stand again, hoping to serve you and your neighborhood. I will work with the merchants and restaurants equally and fairly. I will coalesce to build consensus, but I will do it in front of you, in the open sunlight of this great room. 66 non-public meetings and counting is best understood as wrong and confusing. With all due respect for a great man, maybe the mayor forgot to bring his famous doorstop. That is why I run again, and I ask you please for your vote and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Peter Whalen.
Good evening, Portsmouth. My name is Peter Whalen. I'm running to be your Portsmouth City Councilor next term. I moved to Portsmouth in 1991. I live on Gate Street in a historic home with my wife Karen. My son Peter was born there, and I raised my black lab Angus there, which you probably all know. I've lived here for over 32 years. I came here from the New York City area with a corporate background working for PepsiCo Frito-Lay, running the New York and New England markets with several hundred employees. I am retired from that. I currently operate a charter fishing business and serve on several marine fisheries management boards here in New England representing New Hampshire. So why am I running? I've seen lots of change in my 32 years living in Portsmouth. Some change has been extremely positive, which has made Portsmouth a very special place. I love it. Some changes in city decisions have not been so positive for the residents. These decisions over the years have become secondary to special interests in our city. The city and the city council must listen to the residents. The past 2 years, this council has become less open and transparent, holding over 66 non-public meetings, increasing the budget by $18.2 million, adding over 36 new employees, with no questioning of the city manager on the budget by a single councilor, and outsourcing several major projects to the city manager with little oversight, the McIntyre being the major one. My prior Portsmouth City Council experience tells me that Portsmouth works best with lots of public input, dialogue, and openness. We need solid, diverse, experienced leadership on our city council to move the city forward. I will ask the hard, tough questions like I always have. No more 9-0 votes, which is the norm for this current council. Great outcomes happen with open and honest debate in the public eye. I'm asking for your vote on November 7th. I'm Peter Whalen, running for Portsmouth City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. So nice to have a big workspace here. So we will have 4 rounds of questions. One question will be posed to 2 candidates. They'll have 1 minute to ask. The 4th round will be a question of the candidates choosing from the first 3 rounds, which they wanted to ask, but it wasn't posed to them. We'll start in alphabetical order with Councilor Andrew Bagley and Rick Beckstead. The question is, what will you do to help ease the burden on taxpayers with property revaluations on the horizon?
Beth, do I go first?
Yes, you do. Sorry.
Thank you. So that's a tricky question in the sense that when property reevaluations change, roughly a third of residents are going to see no increase, roughly a third will see a little bit of a decrease, and a third will probably see a big increase in their taxes. It doesn't hit everyone equally, and that's why it's such a contentious issue. So it's going to strike all of us a little bit differently. What do we do to help with that? Well, we have to be fiscally responsible. We have to. Is there a problem? Oh. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought there. We have to be fiscally responsible with the budget, but we need to pay our police and fire like we've done. We need to pay our teachers like we've done. Our schools continue to win national awards, like Dondero just won with the Blue Ribbon Award. We have the best services on the Seacoast, the best library, the best recreation department. We get very high value for the dollar in Portsmouth. And while we might have lower taxes, I think the value is there, and we need to protect that value.
Thank you. Next is for Rick Beckstead. Just to remind us, the audience, or perhaps I didn't mention this, if you have a question, please raise your hand. One of the women in the back will come and pick it up. Thank you. Mr. Beckstead?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a very complex question. As Councillor Bagley had gone and said, my question has been over the last 2 years is why did we go and delay it over 2 years? We're a due diligent city. We actually go and we raise our water and our sewer taxes so that there are no spikes. 4% for water, 6% for our sewer, because we didn't have a spike. Now, during COVID, we did anything and everything. I actually worked with the assessor's office about possibly creating some type of a legislation, put a pause on it for the time being to get us through the pandemic. But I think it was irresponsible of the city in itself to be able to go and not have those reevaluations. You look around us, people are asking what the spikes are going to be. As Councillor Bagley gone and said, towns around us right now are going up 30, 40, some even 50%. That's what's in the pipeline. Fiscal responsibility is where it's going to be at. We're going to need to make serious cuts and really look at the budget. 35 people were added, new employees to the city. As far as I'm concerned, between their benefits and their salaries, you're talking about $3.5 million that was added onto the budget. That's where we need to start. Thank you.
Next questions are for Councilors Rich Blaylock and Kate Cook. Portsmouth is well positioned to attract young families with young children who will be the future of our town, but too often they cannot afford to move here. Can more be done to provide affordable housing?
Yes. I believe there's lots that can be done to encourage affordable housing. I think it's important to have diverse housing, housing for high income, low income, and everyone in between. That would keep us a community. That would keep the people that work here and grew up here a chance to stay here and not have to commute into Portsmouth. I know the rate of enrollment at the schools is dropping over the last 10 years. I see it on the ball fields. I'm a coach at the high school and I coach Little League. And I can see if that continues to happen, the issues we will have. We'll start having to make cuts to the school budget. We'll maybe have to close another elementary school. And I don't want to see us go down that path. So we need to help encourage using zoning laws and possibly working with other public housing authorities. But we need to encourage any affordable housing we can.
This is a really critical question for the city of Portsmouth because affordable housing is probably our number one issue at the moment because it drives so many other challenges that we have in the city around workforce. And we're seeing our workforce fleeing because they can't afford to live here. So if we want to attract families, we have to think about a diverse range of housing. Right now, the city has very few measures it can actually take. One of the things, though, that we can do is we can take existing city property and give a long-term lease to the Portsmouth Housing Authority to build workforce housing. That is the first priority for the council, to have workforce and affordable housing for those who need it within the city. When we talk about workforce housing, we're talking about people who make up to $78,000 a year. We're not talking about really low incomes here in Portsmouth because we have such a high median income. But the challenges around that is our young families can't come here. So we have to find a way to do that. We also have to change zoning in areas where we can to increase density of housing so that more families can buy into the market.
Thank you. The next question is for Kevin Coyle and Councilor Josh Denton. We'll keep on the theme of affordable housing. What specific zoning changes would you support for affordable housing?
I come at this a little differently. Both my wife and I own some affordable housing in Portsmouth, and I don't necessarily agree that zoning changes is the best thing for us. Portsmouth provides the most low and moderate income housing in Rockingham County. We already provide low and moderate income housing. Maybe we don't have enough, but we certainly have more than all of our neighbors in Rockingham County. I don't think zoning changes to add more density to the community is good for the community. So I think that we do a good job already, and I'm not in favor of adding additional low and moderate income housing.
With all of the past zoning amendments that have gone through in the probably last 6 to 8 years, it hasn't really worked. We have not incentivized affordable housing enough in the zoning code to actually make it effective. The one effective thing which has been done in Portsmouth to increase affordable housing was supporting the Portsmouth Housing Authority for the Ruth Griffin Place on Court Street. And I could proudly say that out of all of the current city councilors and prior city councilors up here, I'm the one person who voted to support that project by waiving $100,000 in fees for that $16 million project. So I'll continue to support rezoning and incentivizing things. A good example is when we rezoned the large parcels in town, one being the Citizens Bank, which was recently purchased. Another one, obviously, being the McIntyre, has been rezoned to incentivize. But the biggest thing we could do, and I said in my opening, is to deed property to the Portsmouth Housing Authority.
Thank you. The next question is for Petra Huda and Assistant Mayor Joe Kelly. Oh, I don't know if they can see the cards. I will try and stand over on this side.
Where'd he go?
Should have thought of this. Portsmouth driving and parking is difficult these days. How would you ensure pedestrian safety and make Portsmouth more walkable?
So the first part of that, I think you said driving and parking. The first part of that, I guess, would be involved with outdoor dining downtown. That would be the first thing that came to my mind. The outdoor dining was started during COVID by the prior council and was a great plan. But I think that moving forward, we need to look at what the EDC has put forward and actually refine it and look at how they are looking at different ways to make it more compatible with people walking, people driving, and people riding bikes. And I don't remember the second part of the question.
Pause 30 seconds. Yes. How would you ensure pedestrian safety and make Portsmouth more walkable?
I guess I would look at what we currently have. I think we have enough signage for that. I also, wait a second. I guess what we have is great, and I would not consider closing off any more of it for walking, because there are also other considerations to get the services downtown that they are walking to.
I'm just going to restate the question for you, Assistant Mayor. Thank you. Portsmouth driving and parking is difficult these days. How would you ensure pedestrian safety and make Portsmouth more walkable?
Thank you. I'm downtown as a downtown business owner. I'm downtown pretty much 365 days a year, and I would be one of the people, this may not be a popular opinion, who feel that we don't have a huge parking issue. We have a location of parking issue. But I think we have to look at the growth of our downtown. I actually recently was with the chief of police and the fire chief, and I said to them, hey, how would you feel about bollards that went up and down? And I went to a lot of the businesses near me and said, hey, Friday from 5 p.m. to Sunday till 5 p.m., if we could have bollards that shut down some of the vehicular traffic, not all of it, but some of it downtown, how would you feel? Both police and fire said, we have no problem with that. We actually would love that. We'd be able to navigate our vehicles downtown with very little obstruction. About pedestrian safety, I think we have to really keep looking at our complete sidewalk plan, continue talking to neighborhoods. Panaway Manor, that sidewalk project is going off without a hitch. Very exciting. In my neighborhood in Maple Haven, there's a little bit of discourse of figuring out what needs to happen there. But we're separating those two projects, former mayor, so there's not too much discourse anymore.
The next questions are for Esther Kennedy and Vince Lombardi. What would you do with the McIntyre building and land if it comes to the city? Go ahead.
Well, I think that ship as a nautical term might have passed, but if it does come to the city, I have always said that the first thing we need to do is look at a deed and make sure the deed is designed with a group of people, either through Portsmouth Listens or another way that we can pull people together to really get an idea of what we want that to be. And then we create the deed. And I know some people out there have shared with me that they don't think we should own the property and it should be commercial. We still need to get control of the deed so we can put it in to the portion that we want commercial and the portion we want to be open space and the portion we want to be for all citizens, whether it is a sky cafe or I've heard it all. So I do hope it comes to the city. But I do not believe we're there. I believe it was sold for $9 million.
Yes, I also think that ship has probably sailed, although I guess there's some people that still have some hope for that. I think that if it did come to the city, that one of the best uses would be housing, at least in part of the site. For workforce housing. I also think that if it came to the city, it would probably should be used for municipal use rather than the city becoming a developer or getting into an agreement with a developer. I've also been working on a committee that is studying the possibility of public-private archive for history, the Portsmouth history, and I think that would also be a good use.
Thank you. The next question is for Mayor McEachern and for Councilor Moreau. With our current resident year-round population in Portsmouth holding steady or even declining a bit, can you tell me why the city of Portsmouth hired 36 new employees this year?
So over the last 2 years, thank you, Beth, for the question. Part of it was adding back the...
Wasn't me.
Oh, well, still thank you for the question. Part of it is adding back the nearly 7 school administrators or teachers that we eliminated from the previous budget due to COVID. A big chunk of that is in the IT department, which we are going to need an IT department going forward. If we have any hope of bending cost curves in government, it is not spending consultant rates for IT. But at the end of the day, I feel like we've added back the majority of positions that we need. We added where we need inspection department to fill the need. Still, I know that we could be faster in that. But in the next 2 budgets, I can't imagine that we would add anything. And in fact, I've said that we would not add anything from general government, from police or fire to make sure that we are being fiscally conservative and responsible over the next 2 years. Thank you.
Could you repeat the question?
With our current resident year-round population in Portsmouth holding steady or even declining a bit, can you tell me why the city of Portsmouth hired 36 new employees this year?
Yes, and I agree with Mayor McEachern. We had to have the IT department. Our IT infrastructure was extremely weak, and in this day and age, for anyone who deals in the business world and how much fraud and phishing and all the things that are going on, we needed to make sure that we had the top-notch people that could actually keep all of the information of all of our residents safe and secure, and that you can deal with the city very safely and securely. So that was one of the major increases in that, and I also agree that we do not need, I don't think, any more staff moving forward. I think we've finally caught up from COVID, which was one of the reasons that staff had been decreased. And I think that we'll be able to really be more fiscally conservative moving forward, because I think we finally have the pieces in place. And let's keep in mind that we may have only the same amount of residents, but this city is filled with a lot more people that pay money to the city through tourism and through people that work here.
Thank you. And the next question is for Andrea Pickett and Councilor Tabor. What did you do to prepare to become a city councilor? Me first? Yes, please. I'm sorry.
So my runway to becoming a city council candidate was fairly short. It had been brought up to me by several community members, you should run. Right before that, I had said, if somebody says to me I should run, maybe I'll run. I decided that it was a sign at that point. It was a thought that I had been circulating for quite a while. My life has kind of been finding ways to serve. I have done everything from TED Talk talking about how public services need to include voices of experience. I've worked in education in multiple fields on multiple boards. I have listened to city council meetings, attended virtually, submitted comment, and shared ideas that the councilors have been working on so that I can be involved in the issues. I just didn't know I was going to end up here until shortly before.
Councilor Tabor?
Yes. First, I come from a family of public servants. Actually 4 generations of Tabors. My grandfather ran for city council in his day in the 1930s. My father ran for elective office and served in the U.S. Department of Commerce. And my daughter was the sustainability officer for the state of New Mexico. We all in our family believe that government can be a force for good and that public service is a good. Second, I went into the newspaper business and ran a company, expanded it, and learned the city that way. And finally, I served my community as chairman of the board of the Prescott Park Arts Festival, Chamber of Commerce, my church, and I enjoyed serving my community and found it very rewarding, and council is an extension of that.
Thank you. The next question is for Paige Trace and Peter Whalen. What is your level of concern about climate change and how Portsmouth is preparing for it?
Thank you, Beth. There's no doubt that a great portion of Portsmouth lies either on the Piscataqua River or the inlets coming off of the Piscataqua River. Much of Portsmouth is subject to the vagaries of high tides, king tides, large storms, whether it's in the summer or the winter. I believe that what we need to do is have larger and further conversations with FEMA, with the EPA, with NHDES, and we need to assure ourselves as a city that we're doing everything in a proactive manner to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And I think that any of us who love Portsmouth need to realize that we are struggling with more and more flooding, and that more and more residents are finding themselves susceptible to those tides and those storms. So that's what I would suggest we do, is have greater conversation and more proactive thoughts about what can be done. Thank you.
No, my background, I'm on the water probably 250 days a year. I serve on several management councils, and I can tell you climate change is real. It's coming. The Gulf of Maine, which is right off our shore here, is the fastest warming waterway in the world. We're seeing, lobsters in total collapse south of Cape Cod. There's a lot of effects of climate change. The next big issue that, Portsmouth is going to face is how are we going to deal with it? How are we going to deal with zoning and everything else? The other thing that's happening from an electricity front in the Gulf of Maine, the Bureau of Land Management is in the process of leasing out about 500 square miles of open ocean beyond the shoals where we're going to have offshore windmills that'll be running 24/7. So climate change is real. I'm very experienced, with the marine aspect of it, and Portsmouth just has to get ready for it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next two questions will go to Rick Beckstead and Andrew Bagley. The Councilor Bagley, we will start with Rick Beckstead. Keeping with climate change and sea level rise, should the city consider increasing wetlands buffers from 100 to 200 feet or more and stop allowing building in the wetland buffers altogether?
Absolutely. I mean, we chose many years ago to go and do the 100-foot. We should be increasing that. It's happening more and more. Actually, what most people probably don't know is there was actually an award from the state of New Hampshire Superior Court that would actually ruled on a project that everyone has been waiting on Bartlett Street, and that is on the North Mill Pond, and it is going through. And it is affecting and being built within the buffer. We also have a buffer that is also being affected over on Rains Avenue. That is also something that is standing in court right now. We should be expanding it more and more. The wetlands are there. I mean, they've been there a lot longer than we have. I don't know if we should necessarily be intruding on a lot of it. There's a lot of aspects and hazards that happen, and I think we should increase it.
Same question to you, Councilor Bagley?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a complex question. I think the 100-foot buffer makes a lot of sense. For instance, the 105 Bartlett project, if you read the Supreme Court decision that was handed down earlier today, they talked about how it was a dilapidated railroad yard. There was no stormwater mitigation. The pollution was flowing right into the pond. This development is going to provide two things. One, there's going to be a walkway, a green zone, which is encouraging the residents to walk along the water. When residents get to see the beauty of nature, they're going to want to protect it. So I think that's an advantage. Two, the other thing that's going to happen is the development is going to mitigate stormwater runoff into the pond, and it's going to mitigate the pollution that's already there. So it's actually improving the wetlands in this case. So I think it's a complex question. It's not a question of, no, we can't do it. It's if we do it, we have to make sure the benefits outweigh the downsides. Thank you.
Thank you. The next questions are for Councilors Kate Cook and Rich Blaylock. We'll start with Councilor Cook. There has been discussion that a citywide single-use plastic ban may be possible despite previous notions that we do not have state enabling legislation to allow it. Would you support and potentially vote in favor of that effort and a ban of single-use plastic?
Thank you so much for this question. I actually would support a ban on single-use plastics. And the reason that I feel that way is that I've seen it in practice. I was in Rwanda last year, and Rwanda has a ban on single-use plastics. As a result, not only do they not have trash littering streets, but they also eliminated a lot of the challenges they had around landfill issues and exporting trash to other countries. So that is a sustainable measure. It helps reduce our waste, which we're seeing more and more problems with growing waste levels and less recycling because we can no longer ship our recycling overseas. This should be part of our climate action plan that's coming. I hope that that's one of the recommendations that we are going to see, and I hope our residents go in and help support the recommendations of the climate action plan. When that's adopted in December, we should start seeing implementation of programs like this, like a ban on single-use plastics.
Thank you. The next questions are for Councilor Josh. Oh, I'm sorry, Rick. Used to going this way. I did that for the school board, too.
So I remember this issue coming up before my father when he was actually mayor of Portsmouth. I remember there was a Portsmouth High School student that sat in the front row wrapped in plastic bags for the entire 3-hour meeting. My father was actually against it at first because he was worried about the cost. It would push on small businesses, residents. It's any change is going to be some sort of cost. But he couldn't help ignore the student in the front row, and he saw himself, as an activist when he was younger in college and his younger days. So I know the state doesn't allow us to do that, but I think I would support something moving in that direction. Anything to help our climate change, anything to help our environment as it affects us as we live on this waterfront. But yes.
Thank you, and sorry, Rich. So the next
Forgive me.
questions, for real this time, are for Counselor Josh Denton and for Kevin Coyle. I'll move out of the way as soon as I read them so that people can see them. Now that city workers, police, and fire have been fairly compensated, how will you help taxpayers in the next budget?
So I'll start with the firefighters and the police. So I was excited to vote for that contract. Throughout New Hampshire, there are many departments who are losing employees. And what we did, we just brought ourselves up to be competitive. We're not yet at the top pay scale for police or for fire, but I'm glad that we did spend the extra money, that we took the money that we had not originally had planned and put towards that to make sure that everyone remains safe. As far as what will I do to help taxpayers, I mentioned earlier, one thing that I have been successful at doing over the past several years is increasing and expanding different veterans tax credits. I know that doesn't apply to everyone, but for a community of our size to have helped 695 families in Portsmouth, I'll start with the all veterans tax credit. This did not exist before I pushed it. It was a 5-4 vote against the city manager's wishes. He came back, brought it back a second time. I pushed it through again. That was so all veterans would qualify for it. Seeing if I'm out of time. Nope, I'm out of time. Thank you.
You know, that's a very interesting issue, and it's nice that you voted for the contracts for both police and fire, and I do believe that they probably needed that raise to keep competitive. But what you didn't do is you didn't ask any questions how it was going to affect the tax rate, and that was wrong. And I'm not just calling you out, I'm calling out the whole council. You should have said, what is this going to cost and how is it going to affect the taxpayers? If I'm elected and I'm on the board, I'm going to always ask those questions, and I'm going to ask difficult questions about how it is that we can keep a tax rate at 2 or 3%. When I was in the county, we said every year, this is what we're going to do, 2.5%, 3%. We never went over 3%. I'm going to say that I'm going to vote for a budget that is no greater than 3% because I don't think residents can afford any more than that, and I will insist that the city manager bring us a budget that is no greater than that.
Thank you. The next question is for Assistant Mayor Kelly and Peter Huda. Would you support and vote to change zoning ordinances to allow for private solar arrays to facilitate renewable energy and increased energy independence for our community?
Thank you. I would. I think that we definitely need to look at where in our community that can be facilitated in. I look at our industrial zones over near like Constitution Ave, Heritage Ave, in that part of the city where we have some larger open spaces, especially ones that sit adjacent to wetland buffers. I look at the fields behind like Service Credit Union as you're heading down Ling Road into Rye. Those spaces are underutilized. We know we're not going to look to develop on them, again, if we're looking at kind of wetland buffers and where suitable development can happen. So we have to look at like what else can we do with that space. And as we look at renewable energy, if we look at the amount of money that we're saving right now through community power, and though it's only a minuscule amount, but the amount of people who have signed up for completely green power willing to pay a little bit more. So again, as we're looking at our climate action plan and climate action conversations, it's actionable items and allowing solar panels and working with our legislation in Concord to try to incentivize individual solar panels more on homes too. But again, long-term renewable energy has to be on the forefront of conversation.
Thank you. The next question is for, no, I did it again. I'm sorry. I'm so used to doing it the other way. Petra.
Could you repeat the question, the first one?
Would you support and vote to change zoning ordinances to allow for private solar arrays to facilitate renewable energy and increased energy independence for our community?
I think this is a two-pronged question. The first one, I want to address our historic district, and in that case, I would not. Outside our historic district, I think we need to for the amount of land that's left in Portsmouth to build a solar array that would actually help everything, I think there needs to be collaboration between the rest of the Seacoast and ourselves. I would also ask how this would fit in with the new program that Councilor Tabor has put forward, as there are quite a few citizens in town who do have that ability and do have solar arrays. And with the new programs and even with the programs that are currently available to them, they are not able to take advantage of what they're actually doing and sell their excess power back for a reasonable amount. So I think there's a lot of other issues that are involved with doing this, but for the basic concept outside of the historic district, I do support that. Thank you.
We will try this again. The next question is for Council Lombardi and Esther Kennedy. Should councilors be elected by ward, and should there be a separate race for mayor? Council Lombardi first.
Yeah, fine. They should not, and the mayor should not. And I believe that the system we have is far better. A couple of the downsides of wards elections is that they would create a division among the city council. Instead of looking at the city as a whole, there would be campaigning and voting for the specific needs of specific wards. In terms of the mayor, if we had a mayor election, I think that one of the things that could happen is that the people who are running for mayor are perhaps some of the most qualified people to be running the city, and we would lose them as city councilors, those that did not win the mayoral vote.
Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, and I have to agree with what Councilor Lombardi said. I truly believe that the way we do it is a good way. It doesn't pit one community, part of the community, against the other. When I first ran for council, I can tell you that a lot of the people running were from Allen Park. At that point, there were 4. Now there's some from the South End. It really kind of sees who wants to come forward and run. I also think that by not doing wards, we keep money out of our politics. And I like to think we are nonpartisan. We are friends and neighbors who are working together to take care of a community. I have seen, when you look around a community and you look at other places that do run by wards, that goes away. So I would agree that whoever started the process 200 years ago did a good job. And I would continue the same process. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Councilor Moreau and Mayor McEachern. That seems like a setup. There has been some positive changes to our zoning and planning to encourage ADUs. However, the reality is the planning, zoning, and permit process in Portsmouth is regarded as one of the most difficult to navigate in the region. The net result is an almost non-existent engagement of the ADU system. How would you change this to make it easier to build ADUs?
Well, since I did just finish changing it this past year, we have actually already taken down some of the barriers. You're allowed to get administrative approval if you're going to do at least 750 square feet within the house and you're not changing anything outside, or if you have a detached structure and you want to do 600 square feet, you can do it all without having to go before a board. And there's currently, our Community Housing Navigator is working on a ADU handbook so that it'll be a how-to plain verbal guide with pictures and everything to help residents understand. So I think that that will be very helpful moving forward. I think that we can continue to look at the ADUs and see how this is working. I was very proud to see at the Rockingham County Registry of Deeds on September 11th that our first administratively approved ADU did indeed go through already. So that was very exciting. So I think we have made some strides, and I think we can continue to do strides, but just know we might have complex zoning, but we also are seen as the people who actually create the laws for the state and show everywhere else what direction to follow.
Thank you, Beth. I wish I could have had reversed the order on that. Council Moreau has done a lot of work on this through land use, and I think that that we've had administrative approval is a big deal. I know that the fear that people have is spending all the money on designs and then having it not be approved by a land use board. And so having some of the confidence that you can wait to spend some of the money on design, if as long as it goes through the aesthetic characteristics that were put in place there, the design guides, that's a big step forward. And it's an important step. I think affordability was asked earlier. You know, there's so many people that want to downsize their house and stay in Portsmouth. There's so many young families that a workforce apartment might not make sense. So if we can free up some of the single-family homes, if we can get more people that can stay in the community and keep their stories in the community by moving into an ADU, that is a win-win, and I am really excited what the next couple of years are going to have when it comes to ADUs. We're going to have to continue to improve it. Thank you.
The next question is for Councilor Tabor and Andrea Pickett. Councilor Tabor, you go first. Conventional wisdom is that the zoning ordinance is to blame for the lack of affordable housing. Yet many properties are bought by both in-staters and out-of-staters as tax shelters, taking advantage of New Hampshire's low-tax environment. The downtown luxury condominium market caters to such individuals, and many properties sit unused. What can the City Council do to counter this situation, if anything?
Well, that's correct. You know, we're producing about 260 new housing units a year, and almost none of those that are being driven by the market are affordable to people making below the median income. So the market's not working for us. What can the council do? First off, we can look at solutions using city property. Ruth Griffin Place has been very successful and is a model for us. Second, we do need to look at our zoning overall. 70 or 80% of our city is zoned single family, and we'll continue to see gentrification. We need to look at lower lot sizes, lower setbacks, reduced setbacks, but all of that can only happen with common understanding that we have a real problem that we need to solve.
The same question to you.
Would you repeat the question, please?
Please, no. I'm just kidding. Conventional wisdom is that the zoning ordinance is to blame for the lack of affordable housing. Yet many properties are bought by both in and out-of-staters as tax shelters, taking advantage of New Hampshire's low-tax environment. The downtown luxury condominium market caters to such individuals, and many properties sit unused. What can the City Council do, if anything, to counter this situation?
Well, in 2016, there was a Blue Ribbon Housing Committee that did a lot of work to study this issue, and they said in no uncertain terms that in order to maintain economic growth, we need to attract a workforce, and that workforce is becoming a restraint on the Portsmouth vitality that we've come to expect. In order to counter this, I think that we need to invest in more workforce housing. There's a difference between low-income housing and workforce housing. We do have a good supply of low-income housing, something around 660 some odd units, but we don't have a great stock of workforce housing, and workforce housing has a real definition that is not always adhered to, but it does have a definition that means to meet about 30% of the income that a person has and to have rent that does not exceed that. So to really buckle down, to recognize what workforce and affordable housing is, to use our zoning and our means accessible to us. Time's up, to get that done. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Peter Whalen and Paige Trace. There are residents who are concerned that talk of budget cuts mean loss of services we enjoy and rely upon. When there is talk of budget cuts, where exactly would you recommend these budget cuts?
Thanks for the question. I think that a couple things you got to realize is that about 75, almost 80% of the budget is fixed with salaries, benefits, everything else. So you really have 20% to kind of play with. And I think, from my standpoint, I think I want the departments to really come in and really justify each one of their budgets. Every employee that we add, we end up paying for the retirement, their benefits, and everything else. So headcount is very critical to make sure that, we may have to go on a hiring freeze. There's other ways to do it, but residents of Portsmouth have a very high level of services here. I'm not advocating cutting services. What I'm advocating is taking another look at it. There may be other services that we could outsource where we don't need new employees. There's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, but this council right now really just rubber stamped the city manager's budget with very little pushback on anything. And as a councilor, I pledge to really look at those budgets like they're your own. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I have to agree with Councillor Whalen, or past Councillor Whalen, my apologies. I believe that, as he stated, most of our budget comes from providing what we need, our goods, our services, the services of the community, and we need to negotiate and focus on taking a good hard look at what's been going on with our wants versus our needs. And I do agree that there's that 15 or 20% of an entire budget that we used recently in the last year or two ARPA funds for. And we need to negotiate with one another. We need to build consensus. And we need to do this on behalf of the residents. This is asking city staff to justify what they're asking for in their department budgets. That is not a bad thing. That is acting for you, our employers, if we become counselors. So that's where I'd do it. I'd look at everything, every line item that doesn't have justification for being needed. The fight is for you, the residents.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
The next question is for Councilor Bagley and Rick Beckstead. Do you support spending $42 million to build a new police station?
Am I first this time?
Yes, you are.
No, I do not. The working committee for the police station came back with 7 selection sites, 5, maybe 4, which are viable. But the community can't support $40 million, $42 million, $44 million price tag. We would be struggling to pay the bills just about everywhere else when it comes to capital expenditures. So I think it was far more important for us to pay the men and women of our police department wages that are competitive with the rest of the state versus dumping the money into infrastructure and a building. So before I was elected to the council, I had a tour of the police station, and I really thought we needed to make a change. And we did make changes. We've mitigated most of the issues. We need to get creative. Maybe we need to take the 4th floor, which is city administration, and put that in the basement, and put the police department on the 4th floor. We need to think outside the box, because 44 million, 42 million, 40 million, all of those numbers are way too high. Thank you.
Never thought of it that way. So here's the thing. The remediation that Councilor Bagley just talked about was done during my last term of 2 years. At the beginning, we all toured that building. There was remediation that was done. There was mold that was in the building. And by the end of the term, it was back. So if they'd gone and said now that they remediated, was that the remediation that was being done again when we were leaving office, or was it done again? This building has serious issues. We have put a ton of money into this building, from the roof to the facade to keep the leaking. The police department is literally on the brink. They are literally breathing problems. There is mold infestation that is down there. We need to do something. What we need to do, I'm not so sure as far as $42 million. But I have seen a plan while I was on council that this was going to take place on the lower lot. I don't know why we've gone and we've wasted 2 years of the taxpayers' time and the police department's time on the discussion and forming a session when we already know, and I have seen a plan for it. Thank you.
The next questions are for Councilors Blaylock and Cook. If you could change one thing in our zoning code, what would it be and why?
I would probably allow for tenement housing. I know there's a great example on Middle Street that was grandfathered in. I know we had a bad experience on Brewster Street, and then we eliminated them from zoning in Portsmouth. But currently, right now, workforce housing is the biggest problem. And right now, they have to jump through so many hoops, get through so many variances because we don't allow it because we had one bad experience. So I really think we need to tackle that, change that. You've seen so many Colby's restaurant. Recently, I just went to Country View this morning, tried to get breakfast. They were closed till Friday because they don't have staff. I experienced it in my own life at the Old Ferry Landing. We've had to close Tuesdays and Wednesdays because we don't have the staff. I would hate to see that happen to more places. But if we want to build workforce housing in Portsmouth, we need to zone to allow it, not to make some developer that's willing to jump through 10 hoops and spend 10 months of his time trying to get it. I don't think that encourages workforce housing.
I agree with Councilor Blaylock on this issue. It's about being creative with our zoning code. Right now, our zoning is fairly restrictive, and so we have to be thinking about housing first, a housing first policy when we're thinking about zoning. We have been focused in the past very much on having diversity in our zoning. In the downtown district, having enough commercial zones, having enough housing, and having kind of a good mix of those things. Unfortunately, we learned post-pandemic that commercial's just not coming back at the level that we anticipated. We're not seeing workforce returning to office buildings downtown. And so as a result, we've got a lot of empty office buildings and we don't have housing. We have to be creative on how we convert office to housing. And the only way to do that is to think about different ways of having housing in different types of housing that we could have in former office buildings. So that would help immediately provide an opportunity for more housing instead of having to have land purchased and go through the whole process again to build more.
Thank you. The next question is for Kevin Coyle and Josh Denton. Keno is on the ballot again this year. While it is touted as a source of education funding, very little of the proceeds, as little as 17 or 18 cents on a dollar, actually go towards education, with most of the money raised being used to pay out prizes. It also preys on those with gaming addictions. Do you support bringing Keno to Portsmouth?
Well, the way the question's phrased, I definitely can tell how they feel about it. You know, I don't play Keno. I've never played Keno, but I know that there are a lot of businesses that want Keno in them to bring in more customers. So I guess at most I say that I'm agnostic to it, but I probably would support bringing Keno into Portsmouth.
Councilor Denton? Sorry.
I'm not going to vote for Keno because they say it's going to help public schools. I'm going to vote for Keno because it's going to help local businesses for probably 3 elections now. The same group of people have been out, whether it's George Remick. I'm not going to start naming business owners because I'll embarrass myself by forgetting their names. But they've been trying incredibly hard. Every year it gets closer. And whether it's going to go in at Mojo's, at Stadies, the business owners think it will help them. And in this day and age, I'll do almost anything I can as a voter to help those businesses to keep local people employed. Thank you.
Thank you. The next questions are for Peter Huda and Assistant Mayor Kelly. And Peter, I will move so that you can see the time.
Thank you very much.
Do you favor term limits for members of the ZBA, HDC, and Planning Board?
Was that influencing? Okay, so I guess I'm a little confused about this because we do have term limits for all these boards. So I guess I would look at what the governance committee has done in the last 2 years to reevaluate and switch up and actually put, I guess, limitations on when people come in, when people go out, so you could actually have a full board in there. We do have term limits, so I'm sorry, it's a weird question. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe in term limits in general. I believe in term limits on city council and all forms of government. I think creative solution to something like some of the planning and land use boards, which are volunteer boards made up of our residents, is implementing segmented term limits. So you could only serve, say, for 6 years at a time, and then you need to take 2 years off. I believe in this in, again, all forms of government, that you should, whether you're volunteering, whether you're elected, it allows you time to breathe, review what is happening, what the changes that you have been part of implementing, how have they've affected your community, and then apply to go back on. But I do believe that sometimes you can become so regimented in your routine that after 6, 7, 9, 10, 12 years, you can become a little tunnel vision. So I do think what I would consider, I guess, as a breathing period in between terms would, I think, be beneficial.
The next question is for Esther Kennedy and for Councilor Lombardi. And the question is, I can find it. What are your thoughts on Portsmouth's enrollment in the Community Power Initiative? Yes, you are.
I've had some mixed feelings about this. And it's not been about the actual product. It's more about the process. I don't know if people even realize that they got moved over into another kind of community and another power energy source. And I really felt there was lacking of communication. So I feel that Portsmouth residents probably need a little bit more information. I also find it kind of ironic that and I was one of the ones that got moved, when we got moved over, Eversource all of a sudden lowered their rate. So I think there's a lot of questions, and I think we need to have a periodic meeting and have people have conversation about community power as we proceed through this way. Thank you.
Well, I think it was a good project. I think that we did a lot of work to inform the community, and you're right in that people had to opt out rather than opt in. So if you did not want community power, you had to opt out of it if you were an Eversource. The reality is that the cost went down and continues to be down. And I agree that Eversource woke up, perhaps, or what the market changed so that Eversource went down too, but community power is still below Eversource. And it's been a benefit to those who have signed up, a very large benefit, because through community power you can take 100% renewable energy, and I think that's a real plus.
Thank you. The next question is for Mayor McEachern and Councilor Moreau. Is Portsmouth's drinking water safe?
Yes.
Next.
I think that we are always working. I was proud to serve on the Safe Water Advisory Group in my first term. I was proud to put more land into conservation at Madbury Reservoir. I remember my dad at the Bellamy pointing out that's where Portsmouth got its water. Every time we went to see my Nana in Stratford, and it is amazing how far that water travels. The work that we are doing to bring that water under the bay, to Portsmouth and continuing to invest in that. The work that Andrea Amico has done in terms of PFAS at Pease, where there is a significant remediation project where Senator Shaheen, through large part because of Andrea Amico's leadership, has gotten hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding and led the nation of that. I am incredibly proud of the water that we have, and it is one of the biggest things that we can do to safeguard our future generations. Thank you.
I would say I agree with Mayor McEachern. Yes, it's not my expertise in any way, shape, or form, but we have experts that actually work for the city that can inform us and let us know about all these, and you can ask those questions. So they have been very informative in our time here in letting us know all the different things about how to keep everyone safe. And we do have the Safe Advisory Water Group that also helps and informs us. I can speak specifically to the areas around the Bellamy and how we protect that, and we have done a lot in the time since 2013 when I joined the planning board. We've looked at a lot of different land and made a lot of recommendations back to City Council to purchase either easements or property so that we can own a lot of the land that's around the Bellamy River and the Bellamy Reservoir. And that way we have the control to make sure that we can keep our main water source safe. And we continue to look for new sources and new wells. Thank you.
Next question is for Andrea Pickett and Councilor Tabor. Parking will only become less and less available. What will you do to advocate for public transportation that is actually equitable, useful, and of interest to residents, especially those who cannot walk to downtown?
I think I am probably uniquely in a position to witness what a lack of public transportation does to the residents. I believe that transportation will allow people to build themselves up out of poverty. It's one of the main barriers that I see again and again. Transportation does not have to be fancy. It could be a bicycle. I recently ran a bike drive that got 50 bikes into the hands of young people. I'm working on continuing that effort. Bikes are thrown away at the transfer station. Beyond that, I think that we could work on investing in stronger relationships with the current public transportations, and I know that Rad Nicholas and the Coast team, they do a great job with what they do. There's challenges with drivers. I don't know how to partner exactly, and I haven't been a part of those conversations up until now, but I do believe that those conversations would be a great place to start.
Councilor Tabor?
Yes, we have two of the world's best experts on transportation in Portsmouth, Bill Lyons and Rick Chelman. And in conversations with Bill Lyons, we've talked about, first, what are cities doing, small cities like ours that work, and what are the use cases that we could develop for either a shuttle loop or more frequent type of coast transportation. For example, do we want to be a city where a tourist arrives and doesn't need a car? And would the hotels help pay for that? What about getting workers from satellite lots into the city? If we can build up enough use cases and perhaps then translate those into funding mechanisms, gradually over time we could come up with a strategy.
And the last question, and we are getting a little tight on time, so we still have one more round to go. This is a simple question. Would you be willing to live next to an apartment building? I wanted to end simply.
Okay.
That goes to Paige Trace and Peter Whalen.
Absolutely, I would have no issue living next to an apartment building. I think we have such an issue with affordable housing. I do believe that our zoning as it stands now takes care of, protects, looks after our historic district, which is vitally important. Whether or not I personally would have a problem with living next to an apartment building has no bearing on why we have zoning in Portsmouth to protect the historic district. And I think at all costs, we need to be aware of the fact that we need to protect the historic district in downtown Portsmouth because it is our economic driver and it is what brings tourists to this city. So I have no problem personally, and I hope that others don't either when it comes to housing, because we do have a shortage. Thank you.
Mr. Whalen?
Yeah, I have no problems personally living next to an apartment building. I live in the South End. All our houses, I mean, I could reach out and touch my neighbor's house, probably on both sides. One wall is pretty close. So, you know, I think we have to be careful, you know, just piggybacking on what Paige said, we've got to be careful about protecting what makes Portsmouth unique. And that's our historic district and our historic character. And that's why people come to Portsmouth. So I think we just got to be careful with zoning where we put apartments and, you know, just make sure that they're in areas where it works for everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're in our fourth and final round. Again, as I said, we're running a little tight on time. So we will ask the candidates, starting with Councilor Bagley and ending with Mr. Whalen, to actually answer a question from one of the first three rounds that they didn't get, but that they would like to answer. And if you could do that in 45 seconds or less, that would be great. Thank you.
It's my favorite.
This is a speed round.
It's my favorite topic, so I could talk for 3 hours, but I won't. The second question about parking and pedestrian safety that you gave to Councilors Cook and Blaylock, could you read that back?
Oh, now I have to find it.
Just do the synopsis.
23. Which one?
Oh, I'm sorry, the second question overall.
Second question overall. Zoning changes to create affordable housing.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I must have had it wrong. Sorry.
That was the second one.
Why don't you just answer what you answer?
The question about how do we make pedestrian safety and what do we do about parking issues. The problem I've learned as the chair of the Parking Traffic Safety Committee is that we all want to drive where we're going quickly, not pay attention, and park for free directly in front of where we want to be. That's just physically impossible for all of us to do. So as a community, we have to learn to slow down, we have to learn to pay attention, and we have to, if we want to park right in front in a valuable spot, we have to pay a little bit of a premium instead of paying less at a garage or for free slightly out of town. Or if we're unable to have the mobility, then we need to get a handicap placard so that we can park for free close to where we're going. And that's a challenging, controversial issue to deal with in politics because we all take driving and parking seriously, but I'm committed.
That's time, Councilor Bagley. Sorry. Rick Beckstead?
23 questions. I wrote them all down. So I'm actually going to do questions. I'm going to try to do 5, which is the 36 employees, and based on the responses, did we need to go and add 36 new employees? Now, the question has always come up from time to time again, and you get different answers. 7 teachers were released, not by the city council, but by the superintendent. They were cut back simply because they didn't fill the positions again. They moved children into one classroom or another because they felt it was necessary to do, and we did not need to fill them. There were only 2 police and 2 fire that were added that were onto there. And resignation, not let go. Resignation. You had 2 from the planning department over the 2-year terms that I was there. You had 1 that just recently had gone and resigned as well. During the pandemic, we lost no one. We lost no one. Part-timers, based on the city manager's recommendation to go and make cutbacks. Every employee of the city kept their jobs and received their COLA increases over those 2 years. Thank you very much, and have a good night, everyone.
Councilor Blaylock?
Thank you. I'd like to answer the question, what have you done to become a city councilor? First, I've lived in 3 wards in Portsmouth. I've lived here all my life. Second, I've listened to my father. I've listened to my grandfather. My father served 3 terms, 2 as mayor, 1 as assistant mayor. My grandfather also served in 1970 as city councilor. He was editor of the Portsmouth Herald before that. I studied very hard at Portsmouth High School. I graduated top of my class, went on to study at Bates College, studied economics and math. I came back to Portsmouth. I served Portsmouth down at the old Fair Landing for over 20 years. I've kept you safe, tried to make you happy, and tried to keep you full. Tummy's belly's full of food. I've coached for the last 8 years. I've coached Portsmouth football. I started at the youth level, moved up to the high school. I'm now the head freshman football coach. I also missed a game tonight, so I could be here. So for the people of Portsmouth, I hope we won. But then I've listened to the people of Portsmouth. I didn't come up here with ideas and knowing what I was going to do. I listened to you, I listened to the facts, and then decided what to do.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you. I'm going to take the question on where would you make cuts to the budget? I think that this is a really critical question because I wouldn't make cuts in services in Portsmouth. And so I would answer it differently than what we've heard before. And the reason that I'm saying that is that the services we provide are very valuable. We provide education, fire, police. And this council was already faced with this question during the budget process. We were at the height of inflation, renegotiated 3/4 of our union contracts at rates that are much higher than in the past. And yet, at the same time, we brought in budgets in fiscal year 23 at 4.75%, and fiscal year 24 at 4.34%, well below the rate of inflation, which was 8.3%. That means we cut funds elsewhere. We couldn't cut funds when it came to contracts and our contracted services, but we cut funds in other places. And that means the city manager did a great job in finding ways to keep that budget well below 4.5%, which is what this council had asked. Thank you.
Kevin Coyle.
Well, I have to go home tonight, and I was sleeping next to my wife, who will say that if I don't answer the question, would you replace the police department in the positive, she would be very upset with me. Having worked for a police department for 29 years and having observed this one, anybody that goes down there and says that it's not in deplorable condition is just lying to you. It needs to be replaced. Unfortunately, it's going to cost a lot of money, but we need to suck it up and do it.
Councilor Denton.
I'm also going to answer the question on what did I do to prepare to run for City Council. I've always believed in public service, whether it be as an Eagle Scout, as an Army officer, or someone who got back from a war looking what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. Specifically, what I do to prepare to run the first time in 2013, I knocked on every voter's door in Portsmouth. I got my butt kicked, but I learned what voters cared about. I did it again in 2015, got on by 12 votes, re-elected. After getting voted out in 2019, I continued to try to serve Portsmouth, whether it be as president of the pop-up or now as commander of the VFW. I knocked on doors again. That's what landed me back on the council in 2021, and I'm asking you to vote for me, again, Josh Denton. I'm the last name on the ballot on November 7th.
Peter Huda.
Yes, I will take on the budget questions. So the first thing I would like to address is one of the questions where it said, what will you do to keep the budget down and property taxes down? There's something called zero-based budgeting, and I tried to implement that in my first term, and we supposedly got started late, and it didn't happen, but the budget came down significantly, in fact, the most significant decrease in 10 years. The second year of that, we were told we were going to implement zero-based budgeting in spirit. We went up 4%. Basically, when you implement zero-based budgeting, you start from zero. What we're doing now, and the advice that was given this year, started what we had last year at the end and went up 4%. That's not what zero-based budgeting is, and that's not what I would suggest to do to keep both the budget down and the property taxes.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Thank you. I'm going to take one that should seem really easy, but I actually think could be controversial if people are being honest, which is, would you live next to an apartment building? And I'm going to turn that and said, would you live next to an affordable, low-income, or workforce apartment complex? And I'm going to ask everyone in here and everyone in our community, because we have posed that question to our community within the last 22 months, which is when we looked at the potential rehab of Sherborne School. And in droves, so many of our community members said, we want affordable housing, but not in our backyards. So I would challenge every person up here, all 16 of us, and then the person who's not here, to really consider that question. When we look at constantly affordable housing is at the forefront of every single community discussion. And so we need to sit in that discomfort, and we need to be really honest with ourselves and honest with our communities.
Esther Kennedy.
I'm going to take a more global and look at all the questions as affordable housing, zoning, safe drinking water, and buffer zones, reevaluation, and I'm going to say master plan. It is time, folks, to come together, whether it's through a concept like Portsmouth Listens, and really look at our concerns and our issues as a group and talk it through. Our master plan is outdated. We're not even following it. If we were, we wouldn't be building in buffer zones. So I'm just asking all citizens to start thinking about what is important to them, what makes Portsmouth the place they want to live. And this council needs to open up that master plan and have some heavy discussions. It's time. Thank you.
Council Lombardi.
Yeah, well, there's two things I'd like to talk about very quickly. The Safe Water Committee, it's just an incredible committee. I think that it is, our water is amazing. The filtration systems that the city had put in place to filter out all the PFAS, it gets everything that the current EPA wants out, it gets that out. The second thing I'd like to say quickly is that the police station, I agree, the police station needs to be addressed, and $40 million is today's dollars. And so it's going to be a much bigger, that's not going to be built for another, I don't know how many years. But I think we have to look at it very carefully.
Thank you. Mayor McEachern.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you to the Citizens for Voter Education. Thank you, Beth, also for passing me the microphone. We didn't get to talk enough about the police station. It's going to, the master plan will start every 10 years and it will start in earnest next year. But the police station is one that we will spend a lot of time talking about. Right now, I believe that we need a new police station. But the best part about Portsmouth is that up on the council, our job isn't to be the smartest. Our job isn't to speak the loudest, the fastest. Our job is to listen the best. And we're going to have a very big public process when it comes to the police station, one that I look forward to hearing from everyone in this room and everyone in the community around what do we want to see built when we build a community policing facility. I am looking forward to hearing from all of you, and that's going to be what I call fun for the next 2 years if I'm lucky enough to be reelected. Thank you.
Councilor Moreau.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about the parking, driving, pedestrian-friendly safety. I actually made the suggestion back in August of 2022 that we actually change State Street to being two-way. It is one of our streets where everyone tends to race down it side by side because it is two-lane. If we make it two-way and move the southbound Route 1 traffic that way, we can actually truly rethink our core of our downtown, especially Market Square. We could widen the sidewalks. We can change all our parking to be short-term, 15, 30-minute, 1 hour handicap to make it more accessible and safer for everyone. Thank you.
Andrea Pickett.
I might be about to step in it, but I would like to address the 36 new employees. I do want to praise both the past city council and the current city council. The past 2 years, our country's inflation was at 7% and 6%. This year, it was at close to 3.4%. This was the year to spend a little bit more money. So if we were conservative during the past, it was the right thing to do. And we definitely needed an IT department. I worked for the community development department here in the city hall. We spent summers with, well, this is a separate issue, no air conditioning, but the IT department was outsourced. And we had to wait days sometimes at our computers with our black screens, not being able to do anything because we needed our IT department to come to us. If we have IT department staff in the building, we can fix problems that arise as they arise, and we can prevent issues that are coming from global directions that are cyber attacks, those things that came up while I was working here. Also, the schools, we hired social workers. One of the social workers tonight was at a community dinner at the Gosling Meadows to spend her own time there. She brought her children and wants to promote a coffee hour that she's going to give to families there to share resources. These are vital positions.
Councilor Tabor.
Yeah, I want to talk about the what would you change in zoning to create affordable housing. I think there's a thought process that we need to go through as a community. We need to understand the need for affordable housing. It's different for all phases of life. It's different for a young service worker as compared to a family with a family of 4, and as compared to someone whose children are up and out of the house and they want to downsize and they can't afford to find a smaller house. Each of those needs translates into a different type of housing. And I think if we have a process where we thoroughly understand the needs, then we look at a vision of the different types of housing for those needs. And then we ask, what do we need to do to get that done? And that's actually the process of a Portsmouth Listens dialogue that we're working on with the Housing Navigator for January, February. So I hope to get reelected and pursue that.
Paige Trace.
I will take on, thank you. I will take on the clean water question. I applaud Mayor McEachran and this current council for purchasing the property, allowing the NHDES, et cetera, to purchase the property around Bellamy Reservoir for Bellamy Reservoir up in Madbury. However, getting the water to the city limits and from the city limits to your home is a different story. When I was a councilor 3 years ago, I brought forward Islington Street, Phase 1B and 2A. It wasn't for the pretty sidewalks that people wanted. It was because I was worried sick that the water under Islington was traveling through 100-year-old pipes that could fail at any point. It's not just those pipes that go to your faucet. It's also the pipes that go under Little Bay, and the fact that we all know that they could fail at any point in time. We need to address that. We know that there's a $26 million request for proposal out there, and that's too much. So we need to be creative. Do we put a liner through the 2 pipes? This is something that Brian Gatz and Peter Rice are working on. There's also the emergency pipe going over the bridge that has to be put between Dover and Portsmouth. We desperately need to preserve the clean water and all the hard work that this mayor and this council have put in. And we need to also see that Islington Street is continued on finally to thank you, Congress Street. Sorry. I'm just really passionate about this, and I did get verification from Peter Rice that Islington Street will be finally done. Sorry.
To finish up. Peter Whalen.
So one of the first times I ran for council, it was about the Clean Water Act and upgrading our Portsmouth sewer plant that was dumping just primary treated sewage right into the river, right at the bend in the river. Currently, as residents, we've spent $121 million to build a new sewer plant out on Pierce Island, which was a great thing. We were mandated by the EPA to do that. What I'm really concerned with is we're still dumping into South Mill Pond to the tune of 10 million gallons a year this year of raw sewage and stormwater into the mill pond. That's one thing that a future council, and if I'm elected, will try to address. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the speed round and also concludes tonight's forum. I want to thank the candidates and the public for attending. Special thanks to city staff for all of their assistance. Thank you all, and please remember to vote on November 7th. Good night.
Hey.